My father pushed my gift off the table and said 10 years, and still no Birkin. The box slid across the white linen and fell to the floor. It didn't pop open. It just landed with a dull sound, like something heavy deciding to stop hoping. A few people laughed. Not cruelly, worse, comfortably. My mother smiled at the guests like this was charming family humor. My sister lifted her champagne glass and adjusted the strap of her new Hermes bag. "Some of us invest in ourselves," she said. The room nodded along. 120 people, friends from church, neighbors from their gated community, couples from my dad's golf club, people who had watched me grow up and still looked through me. I didn't bend down. I didn't pick the box up. I looked at the floor for a second, then lifted my eyes. And I felt something inside me go very quiet. Now let me rewind. I flew 4,000 kilometers for that party. From where I live now in the Pacific Northwest to where my parents settled in Arizona. A connecting flight, a delayed suitcase, a rental car that smelled like someone else's cologne. I arrived the day before their 45th anniversary dinner with one goal: not to be praised, not to be forgiven for being away. Just to do one thing I'd prepared for years. I'm 42. I work as a project manager for a regional healthcare network. It's not glamorous. It's stable. I know how to build a spreadsheet that can save a hospital $2 million. I know how to negotiate vendor contracts without raising my voice. I know how to sit in uncomfortable meetings and keep my face neutral. I learned that skill in my family first. My parents have always loved appearances. My mother keeps a spotless home and an effortless smile. My father collects status like other men collect tools. He's not rich, not old money, but he married into the right circles in their suburb. He learned how to speak just enough about investments to sound important. My sister Lily inherited that instinct. She can walk into a room and make people want her story, even when the story is built on credit. I'm the other kind of daughter. The kind who does the math, the kind who thinks long-term, the kind my parents called practical when they meant uninspiring. 10 years ago, I made a decision that shaped everything. I decided to buy a home for my parents, not a small house, not a condo, a real comfortable place where they could age well. One story, near a hospital, near a park, enough room for family visits, a guest room, a quiet backyard, a place that would feel like safety. I didn't tell them, because if I told them, it would become performance. My mother would start dropping hints about what she wanted. My father would start telling people his daughter was taking care of him. My sister would start acting like it was a competition. So I kept it private. I saved. I worked extra projects. I traveled for work when others didn't want to. I lived in the same 2-bedroom townhouse longer than I wanted. I drove my car until it started making that sound you pretend not to hear. I didn't buy design or anything. Not because I hate nice things. Because I wanted something bigger than a purse. I wanted to give my parents a home. And maybe, if I'm honest, I wanted to give myself a moment. A moment where they looked at me and saw substance, not silence. I bought the property 6 months ago. A villa-style house in a quiet development outside Phoenix. Not a palace, but beautiful. Clean lines, bright kitchen, a backyard that didn't require heavy maintenance. I paid for it outright with a combination of savings and a conservative investment account I'd built over years. No flashy crypto, no risky bets, just patient accumulation. Then I worked with a local attorney to draft a transfer, a deed, a gift letter, everything ready. All it needed was my signature and theirs. I planned to present it on their anniversary, not in front of the crowd, privately, in a moment where it could be about family, not applause. But I also knew my parents. They love an audience. So they insisted I come to the big dinner. "You have to be there," my mother said on the phone weeks earlier. "People will ask. People will ask." That was her real reason. I came anyway. I told myself it was fine. I could handle one evening. I could smile. I could sit through the little comments. I could do what I always did. Be agreeable. I arrived at their house the afternoon before the party. A large stucco place with an iron gate and a courtyard fountain. My mother hugged me quickly, perfume and stiffness. My father patted my shoulder like I was a co-worker. Lily swept in 20 minutes later with sunglasses on her head and a designer bag on her arm. She kissed my cheek. "Long time," she said. Her eyes dropped to my shoes. Practical flats, no logo. She smiled like she'd proven something. That night, I overheard my mother on the phone in the kitchen. "She's here," she said. "She looks tired." A small laugh. No, Lily looks amazing." Then quieter. "I just wish the older one tried a little harder." Older one. She didn't say my name. I stood in the hallway and held my breath. I didn't confront her. I told myself it wasn't worth it. That's what I always told myself. The next evening, the anniversary party filled their backyard. String lights, a catered buffet, a jazz trio, white linens, a printed sign that said, "Cheers to 45 years." I arrived early with my box. It wasn't just paperwork. It was everything I'd gathered to make the gift feel human. A small photo album of family pictures I'd restored and reprinted, a pair of my father's old cufflinks I'd had cleaned, a handwritten letter from me sealed in an envelope, and inside the bottom in a separate folder the transfer documents, the real gift. I planned to give it quietly later, but Lily saw the box. "What's that?" she asked loudly before guests even sat. "A gift," I said. She laughed lightly. "Is it another scrapbook?" My mother turned. My father walked over with a drink. I felt heat rise in my neck. "It's for you," I said, keeping my voice steady. My father looked at the box like it was suspicious. He glanced at Lily's bag and smiled. Now that he said nodding at her, "is a gift." Lily grinned. "Dad, stop." But she didn't stop him. Then he looked at me. His smile sharpened. "You know he said loud enough for the nearest tables after 10 years I thought you'd at least have a Birkin." A ripple of laughter. Someone said, "Oh my." Someone else said, "Kids." My mother laughed too, not nervously, proudly, like this was the family brand. I held the box a little tighter. My father reached out and nudged it. Not hard, just enough. The box slid, fell, hit the stone patio, and I didn't bend down. I didn't pick it up. I looked at the guests, at my mother's smile, at my sister's bag shining under patio lights, and I understood something I hadn't wanted to name. To them, love wasn't what you did. It was what you could display. I turned toward the gate. Behind me, someone called my name. Once, twice. I kept walking. That night, my phone lit up like a warning. Missed call after missed call. Texts stacking. Voicemails, 100. More. I didn't listen. I didn't answer. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and stared at my hands. Then I opened my laptop, and I pulled up the transfer documents. Unsigned. Still clean. Still mine. The next morning, I didn't call them back. I showered. I dressed. I packed the box carefully into my carry-on. The corner was dented now. The white paper slightly creased. I ran my finger over it. It felt like something I had miscalculated. Not the house, not the money, the timing. I drove to the villa before heading to the airport. I hadn't shown it to them yet. I had wanted their first step through the door to be symbolic. Now I just wanted to see it alone. The development was quiet. Early morning sprinklers ticking across trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, sunlight hitting pale stucco walls. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air still carried that faint new house smell. Fresh paint, untouched carpet. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen island where my mother could have rolled dough. The spare bedroom where Lily could have stayed when her credit cards caught up to her. The small den where my father could have pretended to read financial news he didn't understand. I stood in the living room and imagined them sitting here. My father adjusting the thermostat. My mother rearranging cushions. Lily taking photos for Instagram. For a moment, I let myself feel the version where they would have been grateful. It didn't last long. My phone buzzed again. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom. Then Lily. The texts were layered. Dad, call me. This is ridiculous. Mom. You embarrassed us. Lily, don't be dramatic. I sat on the bare living room floor and read them without reacting. There was no, "Are you okay?" No, "We're sorry." Just irritation. Damage control. I opened the box. I pulled out the photo album, flipped through the pages. My parents on their wedding day, young, laughing. My father's hair thick and dark. My mother's smile genuine. I had restored these photos pixel by pixel, spent hours adjusting light and color. I had written small captions underneath each one. I closed the album gently, then I pulled out the transfer folder. The attorney had walked me through it 3 times. Once signed, the property would legally become theirs, free and clear, no mortgage, no conditions. Just a gift. I held the pen I had packed inside the box. I had imagined my father holding this pen, maybe even tearing up a little. Instead, I could still hear his voice. 10 years, and still no Birkin. I let out a slow breath. Then I signed my name. Not on the transfer line, on the ownership affirmation, retaining sole title. My hand was steady. That steadiness surprised me. I closed the folder, slid it back into the box. Then I locked the front door and drove to the airport. On the plane, I finally listened to one voicemail, just one. My father's voice filled the small space of my earbuds. "You're being emotional," he said. "We were joking." A pause. Then his tone shifted. What was in that box? There it was. Curiosity, not regret. I stopped the recording, deleted it. When I landed back home, it was raining. The Pacific Northwest felt gray and honest. No string lights, no catered trays, just wet sidewalks and the smell of pine. I went back to work the next day like nothing had happened. Budget review, vendor meeting, coffee in a chipped mug. My coworker asked how the anniversary party went. "Fine," I said. She nodded, moved on. That simplicity felt like relief. 3 days passed before my parents opened the box. I know because my mother called at 7:12 p.m. I didn't answer. Then Lily called. Then Dad again. Then all 3 in a group FaceTime. I let it ring. Later, Lily sent a text. "What the hell is this house?" I stared at the words. No punctuation, no context, just accusation. Then another message. "Why didn't you tell us I typed nothing?" A minute later, my mother. "We just looked at the documents." Another pause. "Dad, call me immediately." I imagined the scene. My mother sitting at the dining table, the album open, the folder laid out. My father flipping through the deed, his face tightening. Lily hovering, calculating. They hadn't noticed the corner of the contract on the patio. They hadn't cared enough to bend down. Now they were reading every line. I stood in my small kitchen and made tea. Chamomile, steam rising. My phone kept buzzing on the counter. Finally, I answered Lily. What she said without greeting. "You opened it?" I replied. "Yes." Silence on her end. Then lower. "You bought them a house, I bought a house. For them, I was going to transfer it." Her breath shifted. "Why didn't you say something I tried?" She didn't respond to that. "They're upset," she said carefully. "Upset about what that you walked out." I waited, and I asked. "And that you didn't tell them? Not that they mocked me. Not that they pushed the box. Not that they laughed. You didn't know," she added like that was defense enough. I leaned against the counter. "I didn't know either," I said. "What do you mean I didn't know I was still the family punchline?" She exhaled sharply. "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "You know how they are." "Yes, I did." That was the problem. "I'm not punishing them," I said. "It feels like it." "No," I said quietly. "It feels like I stopped offering." There was a long pause. "Are you still giving it to them?" she asked. The question was practical, transactional. I looked at the rain outside my window, at the modest backyard of my townhouse, at the life I had built quietly. "No," I said. On the other end, I heard her swallow. Then, almost in a whisper, "You're serious?" "Yes." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just said, "They're calling you again." "I know." And I hung up. That night, the missed calls passed 100. My phone felt heavier than usual. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt separate. And that separation was clean. By the end of that week, the tone of the messages changed. Less command, more negotiation. My father left a voicemail that began with my name. Not "call me," not "this is ridiculous." Just my name. Drawn out. As if it might soften something. "We didn't realize," he said. A pause. "We didn't know what was in the box." I listened to that one all the way through. He never mentioned the joke, never mentioned the guests, never mentioned the push. He mentioned square footage, location, the fact that it was a good area. He said, "You should have told us." That was the closest he came to reflection. I deleted the voicemail. Lily texted again the next morning. "Mom's crying." I didn't answer right away. Then another text. "She feels embarrassed." Embarrassed, not ashamed. Embarrassed. I imagined my mother replaying the evening in her mind. Not the part where she laughed, the part where the guests would now know, where word would spread that the practical daughter had bought something significant, and she hadn't known. Status runs both ways. When it elevates, it also exposes. I responded with one sentence. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. Lily called immediately. "You could just fix this," she said. "Fix what you know what." I waited. "They're saying you overreacted," she added. I let that settle. Overreacted. To being publicly diminished. To being compared to a handbag. "Did you think it was funny?" I asked her. There was a beat of silence. "It was just Dad being Dad," she said. "Was it funny?" She hesitated. "No." That was something. "Then why didn't you say anything I asked?" She exhaled sharply. "Because that's not how this family works." There it was. The unspoken rule. We laugh, we absorb, we move on. "And how does it work?" I asked. "You know," she said. "We keep things light." I thought about the last 10 years, about every family dinner where my career was described as steady, about every holiday where Lily's new purchase was examined like a trophy, about the times I wired money quietly for my parents' unexpected expenses, about the way my mother once said, "At least Lily knows how to present herself." Present. That was always the word. Presentation. Image. I had mistaken silence for maturity. They had mistaken it for insignificance. 2 weeks after the party, my parents drove to my townhouse unannounced. It was a Saturday. I was in the yard trimming the small hedge by the fence. I saw their car before they rang the bell. My father stepped out first, pressed khakis, golf shirt, the look of someone rehearsing composure. My mother followed, sunglasses large enough to shield expression. I didn't rush to greet them. I set the shears down, wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the gate. "You didn't answer," my father said. I nodded. "I know." My mother looked past me toward the house. "This is small," she said automatically. It wasn't meant as insult. It was reflex. "Yes," I said, "it is." They stood there waiting to be invited in. I didn't open the gate. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. My father's jaw tightened slightly. "We need to talk," he said. "We're talking." He looked at the house again. "At least let us sit down. I'm comfortable here." That was new. For all of us. My mother removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "You should have told us," she repeated. "I tried to give it to you," I said. In front of everyone, my father asked sharply. "I was going to give it to you privately. You brought it to the party," he said. "You made it a spectacle." I held his gaze. "You made it a spectacle." He looked away. My mother stepped forward slightly. "We didn't know," she said again. I let a few seconds pass. "You didn't ask," I replied. That landed harder than I expected. They had not asked about my work, my savings, my plans, not once in a decade. They had asked about my dating life, my wardrobe, whether I felt lonely, not whether I was building something. My father shifted his weight. "This isn't about the house," he said. "It's about respect." Yes, I agreed. It is. He looked at me, confused by agreement. "You walked out," he continued. "In front of our friends." "You laughed," I said. "In front of your friends." Silence. My mother folded her arms. "We were joking," she said softly. I wasn't. The air between us felt cleaner than it ever had, less polite, more honest. "You're punishing us," Lily's voice said from behind them. She had been sitting in the car. Now she stepped out. Designer sunglasses, designer bag, the same posture. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "It feels like it," she replied. I looked at her carefully. "Would you have said anything if I had signed it?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Would you have told them they were wrong?" Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair. It's accurate." My father cleared his throat. "We're your parents," he said, as if that settled it. It didn't. I thought about the house again, the empty living room, the untouched kitchen, the future I had imagined for them. Then I thought about the laughter, about the word Birkin hanging in the air like a measurement. "You didn't lose a house," I said quietly. They all looked at me. "You lost access." My mother blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not offering anymore." My father's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being clear." There was nothing left to argue. They couldn't demand what had never legally been theirs. They couldn't rewrite what had already happened. My mother put her sunglasses back on. My father turned toward the car. Lily lingered a second longer. "You'll regret this," she said. "Maybe." But regret felt different from resentment. And for the first time, I didn't feel resentful. I felt resolved. I closed the gate gently. Not slammed, just closed. And as their car pulled away, I realized something important. They hadn't come to ask how I felt. They had come to recover a property. That distinction made everything simple. The calls slowed after that visit. Not because they understood, because they recalculated. My father sent one email 2 days later. Subject line: practical discussion. I opened it at my desk during lunch. He had attached a spreadsheet. Projected maintenance costs for the villa, property tax estimates, suggestions for how it could serve the family long term. Serve the family. He wrote as if we were discussing a shared asset. He didn't mention the patio, he didn't mention the joke, he didn't mention pushing the box. He ended with, "Let's think logically." I stared at the attachment for a full minute. Then I closed it without replying. That evening, Lily called again. Different tone, less sharp. "Dad's really upset," she said. "I know. He says you're making decisions emotionally." "I signed the documents calmly," I replied. She was quiet. "You already signed?" she asked. "Yes." A small intake of breath. "You kept it?" "Yes." Another pause. That house would have fixed things, she said. Fixed what image she said honestly. There it was. Not comfort. Not security. Image. "You're in debt," I said gently. She stiffened. "That's temporary. So is a reputation built on credit." She didn't argue. She changed direction. "Mom's embarrassed," she said again. "About what that people are talking. About what that you bought something that big. Not that they mocked me. Not that they misjudged me. That they hadn't known." I felt something settle inside me. I had spent years believing I was the overlooked one. Now I understood. They didn't overlook me. They discounted me. and discounting is intentional. A week later, I drove back to Arizona. Not for them, for the house. I arranged to move in, not permanently, but long enough to decide what it meant. I hired a small moving company, loaded a few essentials, work laptop, kitchen basics, a couple framed photos. I didn't tell my parents I was coming. When I unlocked the front door again, the house felt different. Not expectant. Grounded. I placed my suitcase in the bedroom and walked through each room slowly. This time I wasn't imagining them here. I was imagining myself. Morning coffee in the kitchen. Quiet evenings in the backyard. A life not measured against handbags. The next morning my parents showed up. Word travels fast in neighborhoods like theirs. Someone must have seen the moving truck. My father rang the doorbell firmly. I opened it. He didn't smile. "You moved in?" he asked. "Yes. This was supposed to be for us." "It was," I said. He stepped forward instinctively. I didn't move aside. "Can we come in?" my mother asked. "No." They both paused. "You're serious," my father said. "Yes." He looked past me into the living room. "It's too big for you. It's mine." Silence. Lily arrived 5 minutes later. Designer sunglasses. Same bag. She looked at the house, then at me. "You're really going to live here alone?" she asked. "For now." She walked a few steps into the driveway. "I told you," she said to my parents quietly, though I could still hear. "She's stubborn." I didn't correct her. Stubborn and clear often look alike. My father tried one last angle. "We would have appreciated it," he said. "I know. You didn't give us the chance." I let that breathe. I did. My mother folded her arms. "You walked out. You laughed." We stood there in the Arizona sun, the air already warming. The neighbors' sprinklers ticking. No audience, no jazz trio, just us. "You think this proves something?" my father said. "It doesn't." "You're right," I said calmly. "It doesn't prove anything. It reveals." He didn't respond to that. Lily shifted her weight. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I live here." "And us," my mother asked. "You're welcome to visit if you call first." My father's jaw tightened. "As guests?" he asked. "Yes." That word hit him harder than I expected. Guests, not owners, not automatic access. Guests. They left without shouting. That surprised me. Maybe they realized shouting wouldn't change the deed. That afternoon I sat at the kitchen island with a legal pad. I listed the reasons I had wanted to give them this house. Security, comfort, proximity to healthcare, a way to say thank you for raising me. Then I listed what had happened instead: mockery, dismissal, calculation. I didn't feel rage, I felt alignment. The house was never about proving my worth. It was about offering care. Care requires respect. Without respect, it becomes leverage. And I would not be leveraged. That evening, Lily texted one last time. "You're punishing them." I stared at the message. Then I replied, "No." I stopped rewarding them. There was no response after that. The house grew quiet. No missed calls, no new emails, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their approval. And that stillness felt expensive. The first night I slept in the house, it felt too large, not lonely, just unfamiliar. Every sound carried. The refrigerator cycling on, the air conditioning clicking, my own footsteps echoing down the hallway. I lay in the master bedroom and stared at the ceiling fan. 10 years of saving had led here. Not to applause, to quiet. In the morning, I made coffee in a kitchen that was finally mine. Sunlight came through the wide windows. It hit the counter and stayed there. No one commented on my shoes. No one asked about handbags. It was a simple freedom. 3 days passed before my mother called again. This time her voice was softer. "We're getting older," she said, as if that were new information. "I know," I replied. You don't understand what it feels like, she continued, to not be included. I almost smiled at the irony. I do, I said. Silence. She shifted tactics. Your father is hurt. About what? That you didn't trust us. I leaned back in the kitchen chair. I trusted you enough to buy a house, I said. You didn't trust us enough to tell us. I thought about that carefully. If I had told them, the house would have become spectacle. The announcement would have been pre-staged, the guests invited to witness. My mother would have hinted at the location. My father would have exaggerated the price. It would have stopped being a gift. It would have become currency. I didn't tell you, I said slowly, because I wanted it to be about care. And it wasn't, she asked. It became about comparison. She didn't argue that point. Instead, she said quietly, we didn't know. There it was again. Not we were wrong. Not we're sorry. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I replied. She sighed. We thought you were comfortable. I am, with less. With enough, I corrected gently. That distinction matters. Lily arrived unannounced a week later. Alone this time. No parents, no performance. She knocked lightly. I opened the door. She looked smaller without the audience. The bag was still on her arm. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. I let her. She walked slowly through the living room, touched the counter, looked out the backyard. It's nice, she said. Yes. You could have said something, she added. I did. When, at the party. She winced. That was different. How? You know how Dad jokes. I looked at her. And you know how he means them. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she placed her bag on the kitchen island. It looked large against the clean surface. Do you know how much this cost? She asked. Yes. Do you know how much I owe? I said nothing. She laughed softly. It's stupid, she admitted. But when I walk into a room with it, people treat me differently. That's the point, I said. She leaned against the counter. They treat you differently too, she said. How, like you don't matter? The honesty surprised me. And that doesn't bother you? I asked. It used to. And now she looked around the house again. Now I see you built something without them noticing. That was the plan. She nodded slowly. I didn't know you could do this. That's because you weren't looking. We stood in silence for a moment. You're not giving it to them, she said finally. No. They're telling everyone you misunderstood a joke. That's easier, I replied. For them. She hesitated. You're serious about boundaries? Yes. She picked up her bag, slung it back over her shoulder. You're going to look like the bad one. I already did. That was the difference. I wasn't afraid of that role anymore. She walked toward the door, paused. If they apologize, she asked, will it change anything? I considered that carefully. An apology changes tone, I said. Not history. She nodded once. Then she left. That evening my father emailed again. Shorter this time. No one intended to insult you. Intent. Another refuge. It was lighthearted. Lighthearted. I typed a response and deleted it twice. Then I sent 3 sentences. You didn't lose a house. You lost access to my generosity. Those are not the same thing. He didn't reply. The next Sunday I attended church in the neighborhood near the villa. Small congregation, mostly retirees. No one knew me. After the service, a woman introduced herself, asked if I was new. Yes, I said. Moved here recently. Family nearby, she asked. I paused. Yes, I said. But I live alone. She smiled warmly. Sometimes that's peaceful. It was. I drove home and sat on the patio, the sun setting low, the house quiet behind me. I thought about the difference between proving and offering. For years I had tried to offer something meaningful. They had tried to prove something visible. Now the offering remained. The proving had collapsed. And in that collapse something cleaner stood. Not revenge, not triumph, just clarity. The calls stopped after that email. Not gradually, immediately. Silence can be strategic. My father had always believed in leverage. If pressure didn't work, he tried withdrawal. My mother followed his rhythm. Lily went quiet, too. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't reacting to their tone. I was living inside my own. 2 weeks passed. I worked remotely from the villa during the day. Video meetings in the small office near the front of the house. Vendor negotiations, budget reviews. The same calm voice I use everywhere. At night I cooked simple meals, sat at the kitchen island, listened to the hum of the refrigerator. It didn't feel lonely. It felt neutral. Neutral is underrated. On the third Sunday after church, I saw my parents' car parked across the street. They didn't come to the door. They just sat there. My father behind the wheel, my mother in the passenger seat. They watched the house like it belonged to someone else. Which it did. I walked out to the sidewalk. They lowered the window. "We just wanted to see it again," my mother said. "It's still here," I replied. My father looked straight ahead. "We never thought you'd pull something like this," he said. "Like what? Keep it." I let that word sit. Keep. "You never thought I could buy it," I said. That hit closer. He didn't deny it. We assumed he admitted. "That you were comfortable." "With less?" I asked. "With enough," he corrected awkwardly. I studied his face. He looked older, not fragile, just confronted. "You've always been steady," he said. I didn't think steady meant this. This what? This scale. Scale. Everything in our family is measured in scale. Bigger, brighter, more noticeable. "You never asked what I was building," I said quietly. He didn't respond. My mother shifted in her seat. "We're proud," she said. The word felt unfamiliar. "Of the house?" I asked. "Of you," she replied. I held her gaze. "Since when?" She flinched slightly. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what? Make it a test." It wasn't a test. It was a pattern. "You laughed," I said calmly. "In front of everyone." We were joking. About what? Silence. My father finally looked at me. "We didn't mean to make you feel small." "But you did." Another pause. He exhaled slowly. "We've always expected you to be fine," he said. "You handle things." "Yes," I said, "I do." "And Lily." He stopped there. "Needs attention," I finished for him. He nodded. "And that makes you the quiet one." The quiet one. That had been my role. Competent, stable, low maintenance. "You confused low maintenance with low value," I said. My mother blinked. "That's not fair. It's accurate." We stood there, the Arizona sun bright and indifferent. No raised voices, no theatrics, just truth. My father tapped the steering wheel lightly. "We made mistakes," he said. "The closest I would get to an apology. We thought pushing you would motivate you." "To buy a purse?" I asked. He winced. "That wasn't about the purse. What was it about? Presentation?" There it was again. Always presentation. "You taught us that appearance matters," I said. "You reinforced it. We wanted you to compete." "I was competing," I said. "Just not on your field." That seemed to land. He looked at the house again, then back at me. "You're serious about keeping it," he said. "Yes." "For yourself?" "Yes." My mother swallowed. "Will we ever live here?" she asked quietly. I considered the question honestly. "Not automatically," I said. They absorbed that, not automatically. It wasn't a door slammed, it was a door requiring respect. My father started the engine. "We should have bent down," he said suddenly. "What?" "At the party," he continued, "we should have picked it up. That was as close as he would come. Not to apologizing for the joke, but to acknowledging the moment." "Yes," I said. "You should have." They drove away slowly. I stood on the sidewalk until the car disappeared. Back inside, I walked through the house again. Not as a daughter preparing a gift. not as a child seeking validation, as the owner. I paused in the living room, the space where I once imagined them sitting. Now I imagined something else. Dinner with friends who didn't measure me, quiet mornings without comparison, a future not negotiated through status. My phone buzzed once that evening. A text from Lily. "Dad said you looked different." How I replied. "Not angry, I'm not." "What are you?" I thought about that carefully. "Aligned," I typed. She didn't answer, and that was fine. Because for the first time I wasn't waiting for their reaction, I was living inside my own decision. And that felt stable. The first dinner I hosted in the villa wasn't for my parents. It was for 6 women from the church down the street. 2 widows, a retired nurse, a middle school teacher, a woman who ran a small catering business from her home. They brought casseroles and stories. No one asked about price. No one asked about brand names. They asked how long I'd lived there. I told them the truth. Not long. They complimented the kitchen. One of them ran her hand along the counter and said, "It feels warm." That mattered more than any square footage. After they left, I stood alone in the living room. The house didn't feel empty. It felt used, in the right way. A week later, my mother called again. No preamble. "I told Mrs. Jensen what happened," she said. "And she said we were harsh." I waited. She said we embarrassed you. There it was. External validation. Sometimes that's what shifts perspective. I didn't need her to say that. I replied. "I know." Her voice sounded thinner, less certain. "We didn't realize how it looked," she added. "It looked like what it was," I said. Silence. Then softer, "I didn't think you'd walk away." "I didn't either," I admitted. That was the truth. I had always stayed, absorbed, adjusted, smiled, until I didn't. My father didn't call again for several weeks. When he finally did, it was late afternoon. He didn't speak right away. "You still at the house?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." Another pause. "I told the guys at golf that you bought it yourself." "That's accurate." They were surprised. I could hear the shift in his voice. Not pride, but recalibration. "They asked how you managed it." "And what did you say?" "That you're disciplined." Disciplined. That word sat differently. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was true. "Thank you," I said. He cleared his throat. "You're not coming for Christmas, no. We'll miss you." "I know." And for once that wasn't manipulation. It was simply reality. In the weeks that followed, the dynamic settled into something new. They stopped demanding. They started asking. Small things. How's work? Is the neighborhood safe? Do you need anything? It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't transformative. But it was different. Lily came by once more, without the designer bag this time. She walked through the house again, slower. "You really did this alone," she said. "Yes." She ran her hand along the banister. "I don't know how to build like that," she admitted. "You could." She shrugged. "It's easier to perform." I didn't argue. Performance had rewards. Until it didn't. As she left, she turned back at the door. "They still don't fully get it," she said. "I know, but they're quieter. That's enough. Because I no longer needed them to understand completely. I needed them to respect the boundary. And they were learning, slowly, imperfectly. On my 43rd birthday, my mother sent a card. Handwritten. "You've always been steady," she wrote. "We mistook that for simplicity." I read that line twice. It wasn't an apology in bold letters, but it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement changes posture. That evening I walked out to the backyard and watched the sun set. The house behind me felt settled, not as a symbol, not as revenge, as alignment. I thought about the patio that night, the laughter, the box on the ground, the moment I chose not to bend down. That was the shift. Not the house. Not the deed. The refusal to pick up what had been pushed away. They didn't lose a villa. They lost automatic access to my generosity. Access now required respect. And respect cannot be staged under string lights. It has to be practiced in quiet moments. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt measured by the wrong scale, pause. Ask yourself whose metric you're living by. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't to prove your worth. It's to stop offering it to people who reduce it. I didn't win. I didn't punish. I realigned. And in that realignment, something steadier took root. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever chosen dignity over display, stay. Share your thoughts. Share your own moments of quiet boundary. Because strength doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just stops bending.